So last week Nikon announced the D5300. This is not the D5300, this is the D5200. So let's talk briefly about some changes. Slightly redesigned body, very slightly. Supposedly the grip feels a little bit better, a little bit more space between the grip and the lens. But overall the whole thing is just a tiny bit smaller. Which, you know, I am not a huge fan of how the Nikon feels in the hand now. I like the feel of the Canon T5i series or Rebel series a little bit better. But it's not a huge difference, and it certainly is more of a personal preference. I know lots of people that love the way the Nikon feels, and a lot of people that love the way the Canon feels. So, the outside, very minor changes. Grip, tiny bit smaller. Inside, pretty significant changes. First one is it is now using the same sensor as the D7100. In my tests of that camera, the D7100, Nikon D7100, I found it to be excellent. Very, very good crop sensor. They've paired that with a new processor, which should mean much faster just basically general camera operations. One of my complaints, a smaller one of the Nikon, is that it has just the slightest of hesitation in taking photos, and I mean very slight, but something that I don't see in other cameras of the same class. And it also in reviewing images, just a little bit slower. It feels like they've shoved that that very nice 24 megapixel sensor inside talking about the D5200 right now, inside here, and didn't give it enough processor power. Well, now they probably have, because the sensor isn't any bigger, but they have the next level of processor, the XP4, so we should see some noticeable improvements in kind of speed and performance of the camera. Buffer is probably about the same, frames per second is the same, but we should see general operations of the camera to be a little bit faster, a little bit smoother. Now, one of the big features of the D7100 sensor system is that there's no anti-aliasing filter. You also see that referred to as the optical low-pass filter. When you remove that, you should get sharper images and video, and I found that in the D7100. The quality was excellent if you have a good lens on. D5200 was excellent, so the D5300 with that anti-aliasing filter gone should produce some really sharp, really nice video and images. Now, there is always a little bit of concern about moire, M-O-I-R-E, when you remove these anti-aliasing filters. This is this kind of optical illusion you get in finely repeating patterns that is distracting and just kind of noisy in the background. Maybe noisy isn't the best word because it doesn't have anything to do with noise, but it's this kind of overlapping lines that you see in finely repeating patterns like pinstripe suits and other fine fabrics or mesh. I'm pointing to some mesh baskets I have over here when I shot 70D and D7100 samples side by side. You clearly saw it on the Canon 70D. Even though it has an anti-aliasing filter, you didn't see it on the Nikon D7100. Even though it doesn't have an anti-aliasing filter. That's opposite of what you would expect, but that's what I found. I have found somebody online that argued that it meant that the Canon sensor is sharper. The quality of the two sensors, 70D and D7100, are very, very good, very similar, but I do find that the Nikon's is a little bit sharper, so that D5300 should be just a little bit sharper. Now, they've also thrown in GPS and Wi-Fi, so this little dongle that I bought for 60 bucks is just about worthless, but, well, it still works with the D5200, but you won't need that. And even with that GPS and Wi-Fi added in, they're claiming better battery life, about 700 shots per charge with this updated battery, which as far as I can tell actually has the same power output or storage capacity, but a little bit of a smarter chip in it, and so that is where you're seeing these battery improvements. The D5200 and a few other cameras will be able to use that better battery with a firmware upgrade that's supposed to be coming later this year or early next year, so that's nice. It's the EN14LA is the new battery. 14 is the battery that the D5200 uses in a couple other cameras as well. So, It gets interesting when we start talking about cost, though, because one of my other big complaints about the D5200 is that 18 to 55 lens it was sold with. That lens is crummy. Now, I am not a basher of kit lenses. I think oftentimes they offer good value. For beginners, it's a great place to start to kind of figure out what you like to shoot, and they're so cheap. That's what I mean by good value. Primes, certainly, I feel very strongly that a lot of people should own, or most DSLR photographers should own primes for at least part of their photography experience. But that kit lens is, as I said, a good place to start. The 18 to 55 lens that came with the Nikon D5200 just could not do that sensor justice. The sensor far out-resolved that lens. And that is an issue. And I heard from multiple people, plus tested my own kit lens, along with several others at the camera store, and found all of them to be lacking. And as I said, I've heard from people that say, I have my D5200, I've got blurry photos. Switch to another lens, you get much, much better results. So Nikon's solution, update the 18 to 55? Well, not yet, it seems. So they're selling the new D5300 body only for $800, or with the new 18 to 140 lens for $1,300, $1,296 here in the US. That is a pretty big jump from $800 to $1,300. It's going to be really interesting to see how this sells. When you're talking about the $1,300 price point, you are getting close to the D7100. You are very close, or right around the 70D, with or without a couple different lenses. And so that's some stiff competition up at that level with a camera that performs better. Again, the quality output of the D5300 I have no doubt will be excellent, but the general performance, even with the newer processor, it's still going to be about that 4 to 5 frames per second. The buffer is still going to be fairly small. I would be surprised if you could get off more than 10 full raw shots before you start to see a buffer slow down. I certainly will I'll get my hands on one as soon as possible and run those tests and let you all know how they turn out. So make sure you subscribe. But, it's just not at that level. But with that 18 to 140, which does look like an excellent lens, is much improved, will do very well on this camera and also on the D7100. It is a pricey, or $800 body only. Certainly nice to upgrade if you already have existing Nikon lenses. But a lot of people that step into this point, we're basically at an entry level or just above an entry level DSLR, looking at 800 that doesn't get them a lens, or 1300 that does get them a lens, they're going to look over at the T5i on Canon side and say, well, for about $400 or $500 cheaper, I can get everything I need right to get going. And they're not necessarily going to care exactly how much of a difference of image quality, and it isn't going to be a staggering difference either. It's probably going to be noticeable, as it was with the D5200, but again, people buying it with the 18 to 55 are not seeing that difference in image quality. So, all in all, I expect it to be a very good camera. Really happy that it's an updated processor. Really curious that they're not bundling an 18 to 55, a newer version. I wonder if one is in the works that they just haven't come out with yet, and that we'll see it start to be bundled with that soon. But I'll have lots more thoughts on this. If you have any questions about the D5300, the D5200, T5i, you're welcome to leave a comment down below, but if you really want a better chance at an answer, it's worthwhile to take a moment and come over to my Facebook page and leave a message there. I do a much better job of keeping track of who I've answered and answering them in a fairly timely manner. There are just too many YouTube comments on too many videos now for me to keep up with all of them. But I do thank you for watching, and as I said, please subscribe because I'll have lots more to say about the D5300, and we'll be sharing that in the near future. Thanks for watching.